the idea was to understand kind of the interaction between tumours and immune cells, and in particular how the immune system can suppress cancer from forming. Came up with a model for normal healthy cells, mutant cells, and basically there was a kind of a key parameter in here, this delta parameter here, that's measuring the response of the immune system. It acts to suppress the mutant cells, and there were kind of a couple of other key points. One is that this B is bigger than 1, and that's basically describing the proliferative advantage of tumour cells, and another one that this D was less than 1, and that came from biological plausibility of the model. That was the kind of the model that we were studying it, and we were kind of trying to understand the behaviour by looking at a kind of a stability analysis of the steady states of the system. So by fairly straightforward techniques, you can identify 3 key steady states. One is the absence of both normal and mutant cells. One is the presence of normal cells, but the absence of the mutant cells. So this is my healthy tissue steady state. That's kind of the good state to be in, where we've got normal cells, but we don't have any mutant cells. And then this third steady state, which is my cancerous tissue steady state, where the normal cells are not present and we only have mutant cells, the cancerous cells. So those are the 3 steady states, and you can do a stability analysis and then basically identify how, as you change the parameters in the system, how the behavior changes. So kind of identified 3 ranges. One where my B, and this is this key parameter that's describing the proliferative advantage of the cancer cells. So one where B was less than D plus delta. Another one where B is between D plus delta and D plus delta over D. And another one where B is greater than D plus delta over D. So as we change, as we kind of effectively, as we give our mutant cells a greater proliferative advantage, we're going to shift from left to right within this sort of region. Now, what we kind of found from the stability analysis was that for B less than D plus delta, SS2 was stable, and SS3 was both unstable, but even moreover, it was outside the positive quadrant. In the middle region, SS2 was stable, SS3 was unstable, but was now shifted into the positive quadrant. And in this third region, SS2 becomes unstable and SS3 becomes stable. And that kind of gives rise to these sort of sketches for your phase plane. So in that first case, as I say, we only have, well, we have SS1 down here, so I haven't labelled that one. We have a SS2 is the normal healthy tissue steady state. That case, trajectories will just kind of go into that steady state. That's a kind of a good situation to be in. If you add any mutant cells into the system, well, that would kind of correspond to kind of introducing some population of M. They're going to be eliminated when we move to this healthy tissue steady state. In this middle region, it's the same situation. We do have the tumour steady state in the system, but it's unstable. So again, we're going to be in the same position where any mutant cells that you introduce will be eliminated by the immune response, and we return to the healthy tissue state. The third one is the bad scenario. In that case, the stability has swapped. In this case, if you introduce a small population of mutant cells, you kind of shift into a kind of a healthy tissue, so you shift slightly away from that steady state, then you move away and you move to this tumour steady state. So that was the kind of the results of the stability analysis. And the key thing then in terms of interpreting it is just to kind of think about this in terms of the original model. So B was my proliferative advantage of the tumour cells. basically kind of implies that the tumour cells are doubling, potentially dividing much faster than the normal cells. So what does this kind of tell us from this? Well, kind of as you expect, if you give your tumour a strong enough proliferative advantage, you're going to be in this third scenario, that even though there's that immune response there, the tumour will still overcome it, the tumour will win and eliminate healthy cells. So, large enough P implies mutant cells overcome the immune response. Okay, so, but a small advantage of the mutant cells may not be enough. If you look at this middle range here, this is for B between D plus delta and D plus delta over D. And this right-hand side has got to be greater than 1, quite clearly. You know, delta's greater than 0, so this has clearly got to be greater than 1. That kind of implies, actually, that, you know, if the tumour cells have an advantage, that they're proliferating slightly faster, well, if delta is sufficiently large, we could still be in this sort of zone here. So that despite that proliferative advantage, the immune system is strong enough to suppress the cancer from forming. And that kind of hints then at what the strategy is of immunotherapy. Immunotherapy basically is to increase the size of delta. And if you increase the size of delta, then you could potentially shift from a scenario where you're in this case here to in this case there. And effectively shift the system, give enough extra enough of a boost to the immune system to effectively suppress the cancer from forming. So immunotherapy relies on boosting the immune response by increasing delta. And that can be done by drugs, but again also it kind of implies that even a lot of what they say about your kind of diet and things like that when if you're unfortunate enough to be suffering from a cancer, there's a lot of truth in it, because of course we can also boost our own immune response through our kind of dietary sort of habits. So that's what kind of immunotherapy does, and the aim is, as I say, is to kind of effectively cross this stability switch that you're getting in the system and turn it back in the favour of the normal cells, basically. Okay, so, but before we kind of move on to the next section, I'm just going to leave some sort of open thoughts on this sort of whole kind of problem. So, this is, as I say, this is a real area of current sort of research, actually. People really, the immune system is an incredibly complicated system, actually, and it's clearly got a big impact on kind of tumour, the ability of tumours to grow, actually. And we're really only just beginning to understand just how it does it. So I'm going to tell you kind of one story about this, actually. And that is, there's quite a lot of patients that, when they kind of present, have a primary tumour and lots of secondary tumours as well. Really quite bleak prognosis for that patient. The tumour has formed in some primary location, and there's secondary tumours that have resulted from metastases appearing in other parts of the body. And they're probably kind of unknown just how many there are around the body. That tumour has found a way to get around to other parts of the body and grow. So those are kind of situations which, for the patient, is obviously a kind of very bleak scenario to be in. And obviously also for the doctors that are trying to treat them. They can still try And so what they sometimes do is just cut out the primary tumour. So go in there, hopefully it's not in a critical area, remove it and get rid of that primary tumour. They don't necessarily treat the secondary tumours. Well, sometimes that simple act of removing the primary tumour, all of the secondary tumours just disappear themselves over time. And that's because of the immune system. Because basically the immune system is so keyed up trying to tackle the primary tumour that it doesn't have enough resources to treat all of those other secondary tumours around the body. And effectively, you remove that primary tumour, you free up the immune system, it can go around and it can remove those other secondary tumours itself. So, through this immune system response, even kind of very bleak scenarios can potentially be treated. And there's obviously a lot of people trying to understand that. But anyway, just as some sort of modelling thoughts, I'm going to leave then on a couple of things. And this is just really for you to pursue yourself out of your interest. And you know, I'm happy to kind of then talk about this. Have a think about how you would explicitly include a variable that explicitly describes the immune cell population. We had a very simple model. We just incorporated the immune system through this parameter delta. So, much in the way we kind of did in the modelling exercise, you could suppose, for example, that immune cells are recruited to the tumour and at a rate that increases with the tumour size, and that the immune cells eliminate cancer cells before leaving it dying. So, based on that, see if you can come up with a small little extension to the model to account for that sort of thing. So I'll leave that, as I say, a little kind of modelling challenge. And let's now kind of think about an even more kind of slightly advanced modelling problem. And again, this is really kind of getting into things that people are really working on very much currently in the literature. And that is our increasingly nuanced understanding of the immune system. So far, I've presented the immune system as a kind of a wonderful thing, a key frontline defence against cancers. And indeed it is. It's there all the time patrolling our bodies and trying to stop them. But it's not always good news. So, sometimes immune cells can be effectively converted to aid the cancer. So, the cancer, basically by changing its environment, corrupts the immune system so that they start working for the cancer rather than for our body. And this kind of idea of kind of the two faces of the immune system is something that really people are trying to understand intensely at the moment, and there's a lot of mathematical modelling going on in the area. So, the immune system is certainly a kind of an essential thing in our bodies, but it can also be corrupted by cancers as well. So obviously, the more we understand about this problem, the more potentially there's a lot of benefit for then how we treat the cancers. Okay, so that's just, as I say, just to kind of leave you with a little bit of some modelling thoughts and how this seemingly simple mathematical model, kind of human immune system dynamics, does actually kind of feed into a lot of kind of current research in this sort of field. Okay, so that's the end of section 1.3, and we'll move on now to the final section of section 1. So this is kind of the last section where we're kind of revising these techniques of kind of stability analysis and phase plane analysis before we move on to chapter 2. And the final one, we're going to look at neural signaling. So what's the kind of the problem here? Well, this is another classic area of mathematical modelling in biology. It's been something that's been kind of been researched pretty well since about the 1950s as a problem. And the whole problem is effectively, well, how do we pass information from the brain to other parts of the body and back? So how is information passed around the body? clearly a very, very crucial thing. If I'm stupid enough to stick my finger into a very hot cup of tea, then I want some signal from my brain to pass very quickly to my hand to say, take that sort of finger out. Actually, that's a kind of a very very basic sort of thing. And obviously, we need to kind of do this as quickly as possible. And basically, the way this is done is through, we've got a network of neuronal cells around our body that basically wire our bodies into a highly complex electric circuit. So we've got a network neural cells that wire the body into a complex electrical circuit. And signals are then passed to and from the brain or to and from different regions of the body by basically sending electric through this kind of electrical communication. And the key thing here is then to kind of think about what these kind of neural cells look like. So these neural cells are basically, well, we've got various types of neural cells in our body, but kind of the essential type is of these kind of very long extended cells. And basically, these neural cells, the way they kind of look at, they've kind of got a cell body region, so kind of a cell body, and in that cell body, you've got the kind of the nucleus where all the kind of the key sort of genetic information is kind of contained basically. So you've got that kind of cell body. You've then got a very long extension, so kind of effectively a long cytoplasmic sort of extension of this body that kind of extends potentially a long way, very, very long way. I think the longest one in our body is about almost of the order of a metre. And actually, if you go into sort of animals, sort of whales, they can extend multiple metres. So these are big, can be very big cells. They're very, very thin cables, but they can extend a long way. And then that kind of ends up with what's called, got various sort of terms, but ends with kind of an end sort of point, and then that kind of end point can typically communicates then with another neuron, something like that. So that's kind of these kind of that's kind of the typical structure of a neuron, and this kind of long cable here is what we call an axon. Okay, so that's kind of our basic sort of structure. So how does information pass along this cable? Well, basically the way it kind of does it is through basically controlling the ionic difference, the ions, sort of little molecules, the ionic difference from inside the axon to the outside of the axon. So by changing that, by changing kind of the levels of the various ionic compounds from inside to outside, you change the voltage difference, and if you follow the voltage difference along a particular point, you get a very characteristic curve, which is called the axon potential. And actually, let's kind of switch to a kind of a short sort of kind of primer on it. So need to turn the volume up.
Science topics in 2 minutes or less. In this installment, we'll discuss the action potential. The action potential is a momentary reversal of memory potential that is the basis for electrical systems that shows membrane potential, you may want to watch my video on membrane potential before watching this video. The resting membrane potential of a neuron is around negative 70 millivolts. When neurotransmitters bind to receptors on the dendrites of a neuron, they can have an effect on the neuron known as depolarization. This means that they make the membrane potential less polarized or cause it to move closer to zero. This chart shows membrane potential on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. When neurotransmitters interacting with receptors causes repeated depolarization of the neuron, eventually the neuron reaches what is known as its threshold membrane potential. In a neuron with a membrane potential of negative 70 millivolts, this is generally around negative 55 millivolts. When threshold is reached, a large number of sodium channels open, allowing positively charged sodium ions into the cell. This causes massive depolarization of the neuron as the membrane potential reaches zero and then becomes positive. This is known as the rising phase of the action potential. The influx of positive ions creates the electrical signal known as the action potential, which then travels down the neuron. Eventually, the action potential reaches its peak. Sodium channels close and potassium channels open, which allows potassium to flow out of the cell. This loss of positive potassium ions promotes repolarization, which is known as the falling phase of the action potential. The neuron returns to resting membrane potential, but actually overshoots it, and the cell becomes hyperpolarized. During this phase, known as the refractory period, it is very difficult to cause the neuron to fire again. Eventually, the potassium channels close, and the membrane returns to resting membrane potential ready to be activated. The signal generated by the action potential travels down the neuron and can cause a release of neurotransmitter at the axon terminals to pass the signal to the next neuron.
Okay, so what's describing this action potential? And effectively, what they were kind of describing was, if we've got some signal, so for example, it could be going in either way, so it could be kind of going from here towards the center of the cell, or it could be going from the cell to in this sort of direction here, then basically the signal will kind of pass its way along the cable. So it kind of starts here and moves in this sort of direction. If you kind of track the potential or the voltage effectively at this point, call it X along the axon, then it has this very characteristic sort of plane. It basically starts at a kind of a resting level. So they said it's minus 70 millivolts there, but we're just kind of, this is kind of my resting level here. And then it basically rapidly increases, and then it kind of drops down. It kind of overshoots this sort of resting level, and then kind of goes back over time to this sort of resting level. Okay, so there's a very characteristic shape for this action potential. And the way this travels as a wave is basically because, as I say, this is all controlled, this voltage difference is controlled by the concentration of ions in this axon. So basically kind of what happens is you kind of get this kind of massive sort of change in the number of ions. They diffuse a little bit along the cable, and that kind of triggers point by point as you go along the cable, and that kind of relays it along. We kind of go on to kind of travelling waves and spatial problems later in this course. But at the moment, we're just going to look about how we can kind of model these complicated looking dynamics. Okay, so how can we write down a model to describe these dynamics? Well, key model, which actually we're not going to look at. We're going to look at a character of it in a moment. So the key modelling was by Hodgkin and Huxley in the 1950s. And they were really pioneering mathematical biologists. They were doing experiments, they were physiologists themselves, so they were actually kind of looking at how these kind of tracking how these sort of dynamics were going on in two axons, but also they were writing down mathematical models based on their experiments to see if they could explain the behavior. And they came up with a model to kind of describe that, and it was absolutely fundamental work. It gave them the Nobel Prize in Physiology. So it was one of the key success stories of mathematical biology, because it showed how the mathematical modelling was absolutely key to this whole sort of process, and it really was kind of key to understanding how these kind of dynamics were being controlled. So Hodgkin and Huxley kind of worked on this problem, and actually if you kind of go to some of the course textbooks, they'll have more detailed explanations of some of Hodgkin and Huxley's models, but they're quite complicated and they can be analysed, but with a little bit of kind of not so trivially, basically. So they're a little bit more difficult to sort of model. So rather than kind of look at their model, we're going to look at a model which was just in the 1960s, and a little bit differently from the other models that we've been discussing so far. We're not going to come to this model from the kind of the perspective of writing down a set of assumptions, writing down terms, recording it. Just the way to view Fitzhugh and Nagumo's model is it's a model of a model. Hodgkin and Huxley's it was an ODE model, but it was very complicated. There were multiple variables. It had very complicated functions and terms within it. And that was quite unwieldy for a lot of people that wanted to try and study these sort of dynamics. So what Fitzhugh and Nagumo did was come up with a model that was effectively capturing the essential details, but was kind of slightly less linked explicitly to particular variables, basically. So this is a model of a model, or a caricature of a model. Okay, so what does Fitzhugh and Nagumo's model look like? Well, it's got two variables, and as I say, the kind of the variables have got a little bit of kind of a slightly fuzzy definition, but W of t can be kind of thought about as the concentration of ions. So effectively the kind of, as I said, these kind of action potentials are controlled by changing the concentrations of ions between the axon and its exterior, and V of t, which is my voltage or potential difference. And here's actually then suddenly a key point, because normally when we come up with biological models, we want our kind of biological variables to be positive. If you're talking about numbers of cells, chemical concentration, biological populations, we're only ever interested in having our kind of having those variables positive. They don't make sense otherwise. But of course, because we're talking about potential differences, we can actually think about these things as potentially negative as well. So there's going to be a slight sort of difference in that we're not going to be restricted in the phase plane to just that positive quadrant. We're actually going to be interested in that in the full phase plane in this case. Okay, so those are my kind of two key variables, and the equations look very simple. V by dt is going to be some function f of v dw by dt is going to be b times v minus gamma w. Gamma, naught, and we're going to smooth those parameters b and gamma were quite small as parameters. They're kind of typically of an order epsilon sort of size. This is the basic form of the Fitzhugh-Nagumo model. It's a very kind of simple looking model, and the key thing is this function f of v, and f of v is assumed to have some sort of cubic type structure. So f of v is going to look something like this. Okay, so it's going to have a structure, cubic type nature, crossing the horizontal axis at three sort of points. There's various forms that you could propose for that, but the kind of the simplest one would be to say that f of v is v1 minus v times v minus a. Okay, so that's the form of the Fitzhugh-Nagumo model. So can this generate action potential dynamics? Okay, so that's kind of the question that we want to kind of study with this sort of model. Well, let's kind of see whether or not that's the case. Let's firstly kind of, as I say, f of v has got this sort of shape here, and for the rest of it, let's actually assume, sorry, this sort of shape here. Let's actually assume that it's got this specific sort of shape. So, sorry, this particular form here. So let's use f of v is equal to v1 minus v and v minus a, and then my equations just are going to become v by dt is equal to v1 minus v minus a minus w, and dw by dt is vv minus gamma w. And if you're following in kind of the printed course notes, those are 1.7 and 1.8. Okay. But as I say, actually, more generally, you don't need to necessarily choose this form here. You just need to have a function with this general shape. And indeed, on tutorial sheet 1, question 3, kind of is kind of challenging you to kind of show the same sort of thing that we're going to show in this case here, but for a different form of that function f of v. Okay, so we want to kind of analyse this system of behaviour, this system of equations. Well, first thing to do is kind of think about sort of steady states. We're not going to kind of go into any detailed calculations. What sort of steady states does this system have? Well, as I say, sometimes one way of getting at steady states is to kind of do an absolute kind of analytical calculations of them, kind of evaluate the right-hand sides to 0, work them out that way. But sometimes all we need to do is just kind of approach it in a kind of a graphical way as well. So you can also kind of work out steady states just using purely graphical arguments. And in particular, you can do it through looking at the intersection of the null lines. So, can be found graphically by exploring the null lines. So, we don't sometimes it's not necessary to go through explicit calculations when you're kind of trying to kind of find things like steady states. So what are the null lines here? The v null line, dv by dt is equal to 0, if and only if W is equal to f of v, which is v 1 minus v times v minus a. And the w by dt is equal to 0. Well, even easier, if and only if w is equal to v over gamma times v. Okay, so those are kind of my v and v null lines. So you can plot these some sort of on a graph of w against v. So my v null line is when w is equal to v 1 minus v, v minus a. So this is my v by dt is equal to 0 null line. And my w null line is going to simply be given by a straight line that crosses through the origin with gradient v over gamma. So from kind of a graphical, from these kind of sort of graphical sketching, you can actually see that there's going to be different number of steady states according to the parameters of the system. If v over gamma is large, then we're going to be in this sort of scenario. So you kind of cross through the origin, and then this kind of graph just rapidly sort of increases for v greater than 0. And in that case, we've got just a single steady state. Steady states will occur at the intersection of these null lines. So there'll just be one steady state here at the origin. But of course, if v over gamma is small, then we could be in a case which is this one. Where that intersects at multiple points with the v by dt 0 thing, and there we would have three steady states. And of course, there's kind of a threshold case where effectively this would just touch the very top of that kind of curve there, and that would give us two steady states as well. But anyway, kind of key point is that you can just use graphical arguments to work out the number of steady states in the system according to how the parameters are changing. So according to graphical arguments, we have 1, 2, or 3 steady states according to size of beta over gamma. And using kind of graphical arguments is one of your kind of best friends when you're a mathematical biologist. You can actually get a lot of understanding of the system by just kind of taking a purely graphical approach, rather than actually necessarily kind of going through all the kind of the nitty-gritty algebraic sort of details. Okay, so steady states you can kind of work out that sort of way there. And actually, for the case of the action potential, a situation where there is one steady state is the relevant one. more general for kind of neural signaling, actually the other cases where there's potentially three steady states can also be relevant. I'm just saying that for this particular case where we're trying to describe these action potential dynamics, it's that case where there's just one steady state which is relevant. Okay, so we're going to assume then that we're kind of in this sort of our kind of phase, our kind of ODE system is going to be in this sort of case there, where we've got this kind of where kind of B over gamma is sufficiently large that we're only actually intersecting with the V null client just down here at the origin. So that's the situation we're going to be in. Okay, well that's kind of the first case. What about the stability of the steady state? So, we're in this case where we've got one steady state in the system occurring at the origin. In order to sketch the phase plane, we'd kind of like to know what its kind of stability looks like as well. We need to kind of work out that. That's a very sort of trivial sort of calculation. Just kind of work out the stability matrix. Well, according that this is this function f up here. So I'll from kind of the left-hand terms there, we can have f dash of v up in the left-hand here. We'll have a minus 1 up here. We're going to have a v down here. We're going to have a minus gamma down here for my stability matrix. And at 0, 0, A is going to be equal to f dash of 0 minus 1 b minus gamma. The trace of A is f dash of 0 minus gamma. The determinant of A is minus gamma f dash of 0 plus b. And of course we know kind of the form of our function f of v. Function f of v has this cubic sort of form, and at this origin here, f dash of 0 is clearly negative. So this is going to be negative, this is going to be positive. So our steady state at the origin is going to be stable. Okay, so I was going to say the first thing, and say we haven't approached this in a kind of a completely sort of algebraic way in terms of characterizing everything. We've done everything in a purely kind of graphical sort of way so far, actually. And you can do that, as I say, for a lot of these kind of mathematical biology problems. But the next step is then going to be plotting the phase plane and seeing, can it show this action potential dynamics? Well, I kind of think that because I'm about 5 past 11, it's going to take me longer than 5 minutes to actually kind of run through that. So I think I'm going to hold off there for the rest of the day and kind of continue with that tomorrow's lecture. Leave it there for there today, but we're kind of